Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. I got an email from Tyler Martin, and he has a quote about the Millennium. So I want to share that with you. We're also going to go to a book called Gospel Truth, which is a compilation of teachings of George Q. Cannon, and there's some interesting things to look at in there. So before we get into this, I want to give you the update on the Flood the Earth Challenge. There have been 6 new copies of the Book of Mormon that have been shared since last time. We're now in a new month, so happy December, everybody. Looking forward to Christmas and anything that may happen this month. I'm looking forward to the First Presidency Christmas devotional. Last year's was very, very interesting, and I would expect that this one would be as well. So that's coming up in just a few days. But anyway, we're at 7,332 copies of the Book of Mormon that have shared. No new people joined since last time, so if you haven't already, I would encourage you to join the challenge. Just share a copy of the Book of Mormon and then let me know about it in the comments or in an email. Please keep the message short, just how many you shared, and make sure to include #flood, because this helps me to search for your comments or your emails and quickly identify them. And then I can update the tracker. So that's where we're at with that. Good job, everybody. Okay, so back to Tyler. He points out a quote that's from the Teachings of Spencer W. Kimball on page 172. Now, this should not be confused with this series of books that we used. I can't remember. I think it was in Sunday school. Maybe it was in Elders Quorum and Relief Society. Let me know in the comments if you remember. But don't confuse it with this manual. Teachings of Presidents of the Church, Spencer W. Kimball. It's not in there. That's initially where I looked, because I like to go to the original source if it's possible, if it's on the internet. In this case, I wasn't able to, but it is in this book, The Teachings of Spencer W. Kimball. It looks like this was published in 1982. So it's in this book right here. And you can find it and know that this is a true quote because it is on the church website in a couple different places. I'm looking at the New Testament Teacher Resource Manual. And it says here's the quote. And I'm sure a lot of you have probably already heard this before. When Satan is bound in a single home, when Satan is bound in a single life, the millennium has already begun in that home, in that life. Now, of course, I don't think he's saying that the actual millennium has started. We've read quotes from, I can think of one off the top of my head from Bruce R. McConkie, where he talks about the fact that it comes at a set time. It's when the second coming happens. That's when the millennium officially begins. There's an appointed time for that. However, I think that what he's saying here is we can enjoy some of the blessings of the millennium by simply living a millennial life ourselves. Keeping our homes as sanctuaries and holy places, and also watching our lives and how we conduct ourselves, and by keeping covenants, right? But I do like this quote. I've heard it before. I just never, I don't know. I didn't think to really do a video about it or to add it to my spreadsheet, but I did. I added it to my spreadsheet. Right now, and this may change in the future, I may create like a different section for it, but right now I just have it under, so this is on my quotes A through Z spreadsheet, and it's currently under the section or the row called Millennium, which just has generic quotes about the millennium. I do have a couple other rows that talk about specific aspects of the millennium, like this one, celestials and terrestrials only. That's been said a number of times. And then quotes having to do with the political kingdom of God during the millennium. That's what I have for millennium so far. So here are the 2 new quotes. We're going to go over the other one in that book that I was just talking about. So let's head over there. Excuse me. So the speaker is George Q. Cannon. He was first counselor in the first presidency. Okay. So this is the book. This is volume 1 of Gospel Truth. And it seems, I didn't really look at it up close, but I think volume 2 is on archive.org as well. This was compiled by Gerald L. Newquist, but these are all the sayings of George Q. Cannon. All right, so we're going to skip down to this page 88. And what I wanted to do actually is read this whole chapter, but I want to start with this quote right here, because this goes along with the quote that we just read. Because, and I don't know, maybe Spencer W. Kimball drew inspiration from this quote, or maybe he came up with that independently, or, felt that prompting of, when he said that, maybe he received that independently. But this is what George Q. Cannon says under a section called Binding Satan in Homes. By the saints refusing to be led by the influences of Satan and not yielding to his seductive temptations, he is virtually bound so far as they are concerned. And when the head of the family can attain unto this power and persuade his wife and family to do likewise, the power of Satan will be bound in that habitation, and the millennium will have commenced in that household. And if all should take this course, man and the earth would soon be prepared for the coming of Jesus and be ushered in, and the ushering in of the full millennial glory in the complete binding of Satan, all of which glory they would already have a foretaste. So I guess he kind of specifies it right here. It's like a foretaste, or it's, already living the millennium yourself, even though it hasn't officially commenced. So it's really interesting. So these are now two quotes that essentially say the same thing. If you know of any other ones, let me know. Send me an email. But I think that that's really interesting. So President Spencer W. Kimball and President George Q. Cannon have both made the same statement. And so it's kind of like what I was talking about. I don't know, it was like maybe a couple weeks ago, how it's really exciting thinking about the second coming. I know that we all want it to happen sooner than later. We're all excited for it. But in the meantime, we just have to live our lives right now, and we need to focus on the things that matter. It's good to learn about the second coming. It's good to, hunt down these quotes and all this stuff. But the more important thing is to actually live in such a way that you'll be worthy to be in the millennium. And the bare minimum is to at least be living a terrestrial lifestyle. You have to be terrestrial or celestial to move in to the millennium. If you're telestial, that's what's classified as the wicked, and they're the ones that are going to be removed from the earth, right? But we shouldn't shoot for the terrestrial kingdom. We should be shooting for, and not even just the celestial kingdom, but the highest degree of the celestial kingdom, which is exaltation. And to do that, we need to receive all the ordinances of the gospel, all the saving ordinances, and then keep our covenants and do our best and endure to the end. So that's what's important with the second coming. It's not how much you know about the prophecies and how they're supposed to be fulfilled. I mean, it's important, but not nearly as important as how we live and listening to the living prophet and what he's counseling us to do right now. And in this last general conference, he brought up a lot of different things. His focus was on being celestial, and he called out different behaviors, things that need to be fixed. He talked about addictions, for example. And so that's really probably more important. It's more important to focus on your addiction or whatever other things need to be straightened out in your life. It's more important to do that than to try and figure out the second coming and all the prophecies that have to do with the second coming. Okay, so like I said, I'd like to go through this chapter 8, the Millennium, 1,000 years of peace. Okay, the first section is called How Satan Will Be Bound. We talk about Satan being bound. Satan will be bound by the power of God, but he will be bound also by the determination of the people of God not to listen to him, not to be governed by him. The Lord will not bind him and take his power from the earth while there are men and women willing to be governed by him. That is contrary to the plan of salvation. To deprive men of their agency is contrary to the purposes of our God. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Because we know that in the millennium, we haven't reached the end of this mortal experience. There are going to be resurrected people there that have completed their mortal experience. But you and I, if we're worthy to move on into the millennium, we're still going to be in mortality. And the purpose of mortality is to test you and to try you and see what you're going to choose. So, but the fact of the matter is that the people that are the most influenced by Satan, the ones that are the most manipulated and controllable by Satan, are those that are living a telestial law. They're the ones that give into that. And so when you take them away and all you have is terrestrials and celestials, he's not going to be able to do much because those kind of people don't generally listen to him. But this makes a lot of sense that there would still be, temptation of some kind. He does say here, Satan will be bound by the power of God. So don't know exactly what that entails. But then he makes point number 2 that he's going to be bound because of who we are and how we choose to live. But again, I just want to read this again. The Lord will not bind him and take his power from the earth while there are men and women willing to be governed by him. And so there's probably some people in the millennium, maybe all of us at one point or another, that will be at a point in our lives where we are willing to submit to temptation or things that are bad. But whatever the case, as a whole, the millennium is obviously going to be much better than the world that we're living in here as far as wickedness goes. I truly believe that based on everything that we've studied. All right, but let's continue. There was a time on this continent of which we have an account when the people were so righteous that Satan did not have power among them. Nearly 4 generations passed away in righteousness. They lived in purity and died without sin. That was through their refusal to yield to Satan. It is not recorded that Satan had no power in other parts of the earth during that period. According to all history that we have in our possession, Satan had the same power over men who were willing to listen to him. But in this land, he did not have power, and he was literally bound. I believe that this will be the case in the millennium. All right, next one. Man's agency to bind Satan. Satan only gains power over man through man's exercise of his own agency. And when Satan shall be bound, as the Lord says he will be for 1,000 years, one of the great powers that will help bring this to pass will be man's agency. The Lord has never forced men against their will to obey him. He never will do so. If Satan therefore has power with man, it is because man yields to his influence. Children can resist Satan. They can obey the Lord. They can be righteous. They can take a course which will give them power over Satan. And every child which takes this course helps bring to pass the fulfillment of the words of the Lord concerning the binding of Satan. Okay, the next section, Satan loosed at end of millennium. When Satan will be bound, he will have no power to tempt the children of men. This happy period will cover 1,000 years. Then Satan will be loosed again. Why will he be loosed again? Because a generation will arise, some of which in the exercise of their agency will listen and yield to him. Thus he will have power over them. They will become his willing servants. In this way, wickedness and all the evils under which the earth now groans will be introduced among men. For whenever men will listen to Satan and exercise their agency in that direction, wickedness flourishes and righteousness lessens. I want to say something about that really quick. So one thing that's come up many times on this channel, especially when we're talking about certain generations and quotes from prophets and apostles about these generations that we have right now on the earth, one thing that comes up is the fact that they were reserved for these days, that you and I were reserved to come here in the last days. because we would be valiant, we would recognize truth, because we would have special missions to perform, so on and so forth. So I'm making an assumption, and it is an assumption, that at the end of the millennium, it may be that there's just certain spirits that the Lord is going to reserve for the end, but not in the righteous sense. Like he's going to allow those that would make this come about. Now, I could be wrong, but I don't think that, this loosing of Satan at the end is going to be because of righteous people that have been deceived. I mean, it could be. I think it's more likely that, the Lord sends certain spirits to earth at certain times, in the last days, very valiant spirits. And then in the millennium, another class of spirits. And then at the very end, this final class that will yield, probably not all of them, of course, but a substantial portion of them will yield to Satan. So I think that that's probably how that goes. Anyway, the next section is destruction of wicked to end Satan's power. The time is not far distant when great judgments will be poured out upon the wicked inhabitants of the earth. Every prophet who has looked forward to our day has seen and predicted that the wicked would be destroyed. Their destruction means the destruction of Satan's power. And that makes sense because, again, if we're talking about, generally speaking, if we're talking about telestials, the ones that, are enticed by what Satan promises them. We talk about secret combinations, right? A secret combination is essentially an agreement or a pact with Satan where he shows you how to obtain worldly wealth or how to obtain fame or whatever it is that you want, whatever worldly thing that you want, he shows you how to do it. And then in turn, you yield to his power and his influence. And so when you don't have these kind of people around, the ones that are behind the scenes, that are making agreements, that are banding together with secret oaths and these weird, creepy things that they do, then it makes sense. There's not going to be this disadvantage that we now experience where you have powerful people banding together and when we generally don't know of it. And they do things behind the scenes that we can't really stop or is hard to stop. So it makes perfect sense to me. Once they're gone, there's not going to be that anymore. Okay, the righteous will be left, and because of their righteousness, the Lord will have mercy upon them. They, exercising their agency in the right direction, will bring down his blessings upon them, so much in extent that Satan will be bound. Satan bound by living gospel. My view of the gospel is that when it is obeyed by mankind, the power of the devil will cease. That is my view respecting a part of the power that will be brought to bear to bind Satan. Satan will be bound because he will not have power over the hearts of the children of men. Why? One reason will be because they will have obeyed the more perfect law, which will have relieved them from his power. Now that's interesting because as we read that sentence, this kind of makes me think about President Nelson and him talking about living a higher, holier way. So if we think about it that way, when he says we're living in a higher, holier way, let's read this again. President Cannon says, one reason will be because they will have obeyed the more perfect law, which will have relieved them from his power. That's interesting. In the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ, as God has revealed it unto us, there are laws so perfect that when this people called Latter-day Saints shall obey them, they will be so far lifted up above the power of Satan that he will have but little power to tempt them. We never shall be emancipated from the power of Satan until we do obey these laws of God. In obedience thereto will bring emancipation to us and to every human being on the face of the earth, and it is upon no other principle that emancipation can be brought. It will not be, as many suppose, by our being withdrawn without volition on our part from the influence of Satan, but it will be by our obedience to the laws of God by our conforming to the requirements which he makes of us, by our putting into practice all those higher laws. Oh, right there, higher laws. Putting into practice all those higher laws which God has revealed, in which he designs we shall practice. Any soul that is waiting for some outward deliverance, waiting for some time to come when, by some extraneous means and independent of our action in the exercise of our agency, deliverance will be brought, will wait in vain, I am afraid. Oh, I like that a lot. I like that a lot because I think there's some people that think that way. The type of people that look for, physical protection, physical safety, spectacular things. I feel like this would go along with that kind of thinking that no, Satan is going to be bound because God removes him. It's not going to be because we're righteous or we're doing the right thing or we're living a higher, holier way. Because the other way is more exciting, right? It's exciting to think, oh, God, literally put chains around Satan, or he confined him to a prison dimension. He's literally not on the earth anymore. No, it's not that. It's not that. President Cannon just said that. It mostly has to do with the fact that we're choosing to live a higher, holier way. We're living the higher laws. All right, continuing. Not that I would convey the idea that God is not going to help us, that God is not going to do it by his power. I would not convey any such idea because I know, and you know, that without God's help, all our efforts are powerless, and it is vain to seek to do anything in and of ourselves. We cannot do it. Human nature is too fallible to do anything of this kind. But we must exercise the powers God has given to us by obeying his law, by conforming to his requirements. In this way, we will be emancipated through the blessing and aid of God upon us, and in this way the earth will be redeemed from the power of Satan. The more people obey the laws of God, as God has revealed them, and as they are embodied in the gospel of Jesus Christ, the nearer they approach unto God, and the more they become like him, the more power they get over themselves and over the adversary. All right. We're going to skip this next one because this is the one that we already read. The next section is destructions to cleanse the earth. If the destruction of the wicked among the Nephites was necessary in order to bring about a reign of peace and righteousness for 3 or 4 generations, do you not think that there will have to be great and overwhelming destructions to cleanse the earth of the wicked and to lay the foundation of 1,000 years of peace and righteousness? Will wickedness be allowed to flourish? I tell you, no. The wicked will be destroyed according to the words of all the prophets, and the righteous only will survive. There will be a cleansing of the earth from the wicked, as great in its place as the cleansing of the earth by the flood that came in the days of Noah, though this time it will be by fire. Malachi says the day will come when the wicked shall be ashes under the soles of the feet of the righteous. Already, as I have said, you can see the operation of this cleansing process among us. Interesting. The wicked are gradually being purged from among us. I might have to add this one to my spreadsheet. The wicked are gradually being purged from among us. It is not very perceptible. We have got to think about it and call it to mind to become aware of it, but we can become aware of it if we will reflect. And this will be more and more the case as the power of God increases and the responsibility of the Latter-day Saints becomes greater. Therefore, I'm looking for destructions and for judgments. I'm looking for the cleansing power of God among us, as well as among the nations of the earth, in order that the foundations of that great and glorious time shall be laid when Jesus shall reign upon the earth. This is a very interesting concept. And it's one that a lot of people probably don't like to think about, because let's think about it and bring it to its logical conclusion. So if there are wicked that are gradually being purged, that means that they're being removed. They're being destroyed. They're dying, right? Okay, let me put it this way. I think there's kind of like two two things that you can think about here. One is we have the separating of the wheat and the tares. That's one way that the wicked are being purged. There's a lot of people right now that are separating themselves from the church because the division in society, the division of values is becoming really wide, and you cannot at this point really comfortably be a member of the church but still fit in with the world. It's harder to do now than it has been in decades past. So in that way, they're being purged from among the membership of the church. But the way that he's talking about it here, he makes it seem as though there are some that are actually like dying. They are being removed from the earth. And I don't think that it's just outside of the church. So I know that's not a very pleasant thing to think about. I know a lot of people will kind of like push back because it's not comfortable to think about family members, friends, people that you know that are technically members of the church, but ultimately they're not valiant. They're not, in fact, they may just flat out be tares. They're members of the church in name only. And yet you wouldn't be able to tell them apart from any worldly person when they're not at church. Does it make sense? So this is just a really interesting thing that he says right here. And I'm going to put it on one of my spreadsheets that he says the operation of this cleansing process. Okay, I'm just going to read it again. Already, as I have said, you can see the operation of this cleansing process among us. The wicked are gradually being purged from among us. It is not very perceptible. We've got to think about it and call it to mind to become aware of it. So let me know your thoughts about that. What do you think he's saying that it's not very perceptible? I think it has to do with the fact that there's a lot of people that are willing to ignore the truth about a person because they don't want to be viewed as judging somebody. And we cannot judge. We cannot tell a person where they're going to go after this life, and we shouldn't be telling other people where they're going to go after this life. But I think that you can still be aware when there's wolves in sheep's clothing, or when there's people that clearly are not living the way that they should. I think that if you become aware of that fact, and then you see that they remove themselves from the church or whatever the case may be, then maybe it makes a little bit of sense. Okay, let's continue. Millennial conditions. Now, how will it be on this earth when Christ reigns? When the millennium dawns, Satan bound, and the elements of the earth at our disposal and under our control. That's interesting. The elements of the earth at our disposal and under our control. I'm not sure that I've heard that before. We know that it's going to be a paradisiacal world, but as far as the elements of the earth being at our disposal and our control, under our control, I'm not sure I've heard that anywhere else. There will be no hunger, no thirst, no nakedness, no vagrants, no houseless people. All will have that which is necessary to supply their physical wants, but there will be no waste. One man will not be allowed to lord it over another and take possession of more than he needs, but all will have a fullness. Satan will be bound. He will not have power to inflict the misery he has done and is doing. It's interesting here where he says that one man will not be allowed to lord over it. So this seems to be talking about how the world works right now. That essentially you have people that are in control of different resources, assets, goods, things like that. And it's just like the way that the world works right now. It's a very selfish world. I don't think that's to say that if you work at like a bank, a credit card company, you're a landlord, you're whatever, just the way that the world works right now, that you are unrighteous, but that this system, the way things that work right now, really aren't a perfect system. It's not the law of consecration. Uh, and I've wondered many times exactly how it's going to work. We know some of how it's going to work, um, but there's also a lot of questions that we don't have answered. But, the way that things work right now, I don't think are right according to the Lord. I think that the way that we're doing things right now, and when I say we, I'm talking about the United States and the Western world, I think it's probably the best that it can be as far as like the economy goes and our um, way of doing the economy. But still, there's a lot of influence from Satan, because there's a lot of people that are greedy. So I'm talking about capitalism. I think capitalism is the best system in our current condition. We know that the law of consecration is better, but it requires everybody to be righteous and to participate in it. So we're stuck with capitalism, which is very good. It's very efficient, but there are definitely abuses within it. And so much so that, I do believe that sometimes regulation is required because people can get taken advantage of, because you have really large entities that are very powerful that have resources that you don't, and they can kind of work things to their favor. So anyway, this phrase right here where he's talking about one man will not be allowed to lord it over another and take possession of more than he needs, but all will have a fullness. Satan will be bound. So he ties that in with Satan. And we know that in this world, when you have money, you have power. And there's different things in the scriptures associating Satan with money, because money essentially is control. And so if you're trying to work your will in the world, it's probably important to acquire money. So anyway, let's continue. But how has Satan obtained such power? By men obeying him instead of God. That is the root of all the misery that comes upon mankind. When Satan is bound, this will be stopped. He will not be able, for 1,000 years at least, to inflict upon mankind the misery and the sorrow that they have suffered through their obedience to him. After the 1,000 years, he will regain some of his present power. It will be as it was among the Nephites. Men will arise who will object to working for the benefit of others. Class distinctions will once more make themselves apparent. Satan will regain his power and will maintain it until the great battle shall take place, which is spoken of in the scriptures. We have a good prospect before us. We are at the beginning, not the end, of the 1,000 years of peace. If we are faithful, we are to be the happy pioneers of this new order of things that is to be established upon the earth. Our children, if they are faithful, will live generation after generation in this glorious condition. We shall build temples, and we shall go forth in peace and in righteousness, doing the works of redemption that have to be done for those who have died in ignorance of the gospel and without receiving these saving ordinances. We shall find plenty of employment during the 1,000 years in doing these works, and the earth will be cleansed from sin. There will be no war, for swords will be beaten into plowshares, and spears into pruning hooks, and there shall be peace from one end of the earth to the other. All right, the earth to be renewed. The 10th article of faith of the Latter-day Saints states, among other things, that their belief that that the earth will be renewed and receive its paradisiacal glory. The question is sometimes asked if this change is to take place before the millennial reign of peace, during that period, or afterwards. That the earth is to be renewed and glorified is evident from the words of the New Testament writers. The Savior told his disciples that heaven and earth shall pass away. John the Revelator says that in his vision of future events, he saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away. He continues by describing the glories of the holy city, the New Jerusalem, which had come down upon this new earth from God out of heaven. The revelation of St. John depicts both past and future events. These events are evidently set forth by the apostle in the order in which they should occur. According to the order of description, the renewing of the earth is to take place after the millennial reign, for the occurrences of the 1,000 years of peace, as well as those that should follow that glorious era, are mentioned before the event of the earth passing away and being restored as the glorified abode of immortal beings. The revelations given to the prophet Joseph Smith make it clear that the earth is to be renewed and receive its paradisiacal glory after the peaceful reign of 1,000 years has passed. I'm not so sure that that's right, because as we've studied many other words of the prophets and apostles, the earth is going to become a terrestrial world, a world in a terrestrial condition. And it will be paradisiacal because it's going to return to the way it was before the fall, the way that the world was at the time of Adam and Eve before the fall. So we do know, however, that after the millennium, it's going to move into, like, once mortality on this earth is over, once all of it is over, it's going to turn into a celestial sphere. It's going to become a celestial world. So this doesn't appear to be entirely correct, although there will be a change after the millennium from a terrestrial world to a celestial world. Okay, so let's continue though. In a revelation given him in September 1830 are recorded these words: "When the 1,000 years are ended and men again begin to deny their God, then will I spare the earth for a little season, and the end shall come, and the heaven and the earth shall be consumed and pass away, and there shall be a new heaven and a new earth. For all old things shall pass away, and all things shall become new, even the heaven and the earth, and all the fullness thereof, both men and beasts, the fowls of the air, and the fishes of the sea." Okay, and that's it for this chapter and for this video. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.